The Tau Empire is a Xenos domain located within the region of space known as the Eastern Fringes. Within its domains are worlds populated by a number of races. The most common of these are the Tau themselves, but other races within their empire include the Kroot, Thraxians, Nikasar, and in some parts, even humans. The main fundamental belief system held by the Tau Empire is a philosophy known as the Tau Va. The Tau Va, or as it is more commonly known, the Greater Good, is based on the idea of improving the quality of life within Tau society as a whole, by making it more prosperous and successful through the harmonious and united actions undertaken by all races under the Tau Va. This philosophy that is so deeply ingrained within Tau society is the closest that the race has come to developing a fully fledged religious ideology. When emotions are experienced and beliefs propagated by sentient races, they will over time become reflected within the warp. As these feelings and values grow greater in intensity and frequency, their warp-spawned echoes will eventually unite into a singular entity, which, to grossly oversimplify, can be described as a god which represents such viewpoints and emotions. One of the most recent examples of this is Slanesh, the chaos god of pleasure and excess, who was created as a result of the mass hedonistic and overindulgent societal actions of the ancient Eldari Empire. So could the Tau themselves one day ever create a god that embodies the greater good, a possible incarnation of the Tau Va itself? It's worth noting that an entity which could be described as a god of the greater good does indeed already exist, even if the Tau themselves had no hand in directly creating it. Within the novel War of Secrets, the sub-commander of the Fourth Sphere expansion fleet, known as Tutor Twiceblade, explains to Kais the Living Weapon the events detailing how their fleet was able to escape from the warp thanks to the actions of what could only be described as a godlike entity.
There was something out there amongst the swirling nebulae, something vast. More of an impression of sentience than an actual creature. It had many arms, I think. Some of those were built to nurture or to provide, others to destroy. In physique it was familiar to us, but it was built much like a member of the Orn, though in retrospect it was bulkier and many of its hands had 5 digits, as if the notion of human beauty had mingled with the optimal form of the Tau. It had no face, only a blank and impassive mask. It was somehow familiar to me, reassuring even, yet it was repugnant at the same time. And I can assure you it was no mirage. Every member of every vessel saw the same thing, though as with all forms in the sub-realm it could not be recorded. But this entity was our saviour. It looked down upon us. I felt something of good in it. Some twisted form of altruism, or communality, perhaps. I found it strangely calming to behold, Master, but I also felt its hunger to grow, to spread its many limbs from one tip of the galaxy's spiral arm to the other, to remake everything in its own image. I remember feeling that, and then feeling like it peered directly into my soul. Just when I thought I would ignite from the inside, it reached out with its many limbs and ripped a hole in the swirling nebulae that had becalmed us.
Twiceblade would then also explain to Kais that this entity was a corruption of the Tau Va created by the Gevesa, humans who are loyal to the Tau Empire thanks to their interpretation of the greater good. Twiceblade also speculates that this particular entity was also given form thanks to those psychically sensitive races which serve as auxiliaries to the Tau Empire. Such news sends Kais into an explosive rage, who along with Twiceblade now deem that all other races are dangerous and corrupting to the core belief systems of the Tau Empire.
They have created a false god. The mind science races have created a god in the image of the Tau Va.
So, seeing as how other races within the Tau Empire can and indeed have created their own version of a god of the greater good, could the Tau themselves ever potentially do so? Theoretically speaking, it is indeed possible that over time, as the Tau slowly evolve to become more psychically sensitive, that their emotions will reverberate with greater intensity within the depths of the warp. The Tau themselves, from an evolutionary standpoint, are still an extremely young species, having evolved from a Stone Age to Space Age society over the course of only approximately 5,000 years. Because of their relatively short evolution, the Tau themselves are noted for lacking almost any kind of sensitivity to the tides of the warp. This is not to say that the Tau themselves have no connection whatsoever, or bear an immunity to the energies of the warp itself, for they do indeed have souls, which serve as a mortal's psychic echo within warp space. It's just that Tau souls are extremely dim when compared to almost every other sentient race. With humans, for example, the first psychers known simply as the Shamans evolved roughly around the time of the Late Stone Age or Early Bronze Age, when human society was still comprised largely of hunter-gatherers. Psychers would not appear again en masse within the species until roughly M22, tens of thousands of years later. Modern humanity as a species, whose souls resonate stronger within the warp than those of the Tau, is roughly 200 to 250,000 years old, whereas the Eldari or Orcs by comparison, with the Eldari in particular having souls that are far more powerful than almost any other race, are approximately 60 million years old. Because of this, it would seem to suggest that the Tau themselves currently do not resonate with a strong enough presence within the warp to create a more potent psychic echo, which in turn begins the creation of a potential Tau pantheon. But that is not to say that the Tau will be completely unable to do so forever. Thanks in part to their civilization's caste system, which dictates their societal roles, the Tau have evolved into 5 distinct subspecies, with individuals being only permitted to breed with those of the same caste. The Fire caste, who serve as the Tau Empire's military, are strong and muscular. The Earth caste, who are scientists, engineers, and labourers, are short, dense, and heavily built. The Water caste, who act as merchants and diplomats, are tall and slender, and the Air caste, who act as pilots and messengers, are lanky, long-limbed, and delicately boned. As such, it's entirely possible that given a time span of a few thousand years, that Psychers could begin to appear and be officially recognized within Tau society. This in turn would also mean that their presence within the warp grows greater, and their beliefs and emotions could very well begin to have reflections generated within the immaterium. Even now, it appears that some Tau have already begun their evolution into Psychers. Chasseur Viola Case Montia, or Commander Farsight to Imperial forces, has been known to have suffered bouts of precognition, which could indicate his status as a latent Psyker, as documented within the novel Farsight Crisis of Faith, where he suffered the first of which upon the Scabbard, the flagship of the Scar-Lord's Space Marine chapter. Even the ethereal caste who rule over Tau society are rumoured to be able to control the other castes through means other than simple charisma and loyalty. While some believe that the ethereals manipulate other Tau using biological means, such as pheromones, it has been noted that studies upon the diamond-shaped organ within the skull cavity of the ethereals show that it holds no biological function, suggesting a more esoteric and possibly psychic means of control. As a result, unless the Tau themselves find a way to prevent their souls from becoming more powerful through their natural evolution, which would result in them burning brighter within the warp, then the creation of their own god of the greater good may simply be inevitable. While the Tau do not actively worship the tenets of the Tau Va, like some of their auxiliary races do, that may not be enough to prevent a god from being created from their widely proliferated philosophical mindset. After all, the Eldari managed to create a god that echoed their feelings of pleasure through their society's simple act of overindulgence rather than outright worship of such actions. In which case, it may mean that within the span of a few millennia, or possibly even less given their rapid evolution, an entity known as Tau Va will awaken as the true god of the greater good. But this then leads to a final question. Would such an entity be purely confined to a singular race, similar to how Gork and Mork are the gods of the Orcs, or would it be more all-encompassing like the Chaos Gods? Given the wide amount of races that follow the beliefs of the Tau Va, such an entity, or even entities, could theoretically evolve into becoming the Gods of Order. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.